What's going on, guys? Zane here with Everything Vive. I want to welcome you back for another episode. As promised, we are here with our next interview, and I know this took a little bit longer to get to you guys than we wanted, but it is here. We are excited to share it with you, and it is with Phil Smith of Ionized Studios, and they are the game studio that brings us all, or that brought us all, Ironwolf VR. And we've talked about this on a previous Game Talk. I believe I was the one that brought it up, and it's a lot of fun, especially in multiplayer. You're in a submarine, old school, like World War I, World War II kind of feel. It makes excellent use of room scale, and it's got such a great feel to it. It's got a unique multiplayer aspect because everybody has a different role, and we've had a lot of fun with it. Damon, myself, and Ronnie have actually all jumped into several games together, and we're having a blast. And we're hoping that by highlighting it here, anybody who's on the fence about getting it will jump in and really improve that player base and make it even that much more fun. So before we get into it, though, just a couple of quick housekeeping items. The first is Happy May. We are here, and this is the first episode of this month in which we promise to give away a Steam gift card. And so it's going to be worth $20, and the winner is Homiwala, and I just pulled it out of a hat. We actually put everybody who entered in, and it was just randomly drawn right now. But Homiwala, we'll be contacting you through the email that you sent us. But if you hear this, you can go ahead and celebrate and get in touch with us if we don't reach out to you before then. But for anybody who is interested, we are doing this on a ongoing basis. It is a monthly drawing, so all you have to do to enter is leave us a review on iTunes, hopefully a good one. But be honest, we just want to get your feedback and want to help the podcast grow. And from there, just send us a screenshot of that review to contact@everythingvive.com, and there'll be info in the show notes. And so once you send that to us, we'll get you entered in, and you will be eligible to receive a $20 Steam gift card, which we will draw at the beginning of every month and announce the winner on that corresponding episode. So, long-winded, I'm almost done. We're going to get into the interview shortly, but before that, I have more good news, and that is we are giving away 3 Steam keys for Ironwolf VR, courtesy of the great guys at Ionized Studios. So to enter into that, and this is a different competition, this is just for the Steam key giveaways. To enter into that, there's a corresponding YouTube episode for this. So no matter what you're listening on, iTunes, Stitcher, just go to YouTube. If you're already on YouTube, then hey, you're in the right spot. But it's going to be episode number 67. Leave a comment, and I believe what we wanted to do is get your favorite submarine movie. So leave a comment, let us know what you thought of the interview. Leave your favorite submarine movie, and we'll keep the discussion going on there. And on our next episode, I will make sure to announce all of the winners. And like I said, there's 3 of them, so you have a good chance, or a better chance than if there's only 1 key. And like I said, it's a really fun game, especially the multiplayer is really coming along well with the number of players that are starting to discover the game. So that being said, long-winded intro is over. We are going to jump right into this episode, and I won't even preface it. We go into everything about the game and about Phil and Ionized Studios. So hope you guys enjoy the episode, and here we go. Phil, how's it going, man?
Good, thank you. How are you, Zane?
Doing fantastic. So we got a full house here today. I'm here with Ronnie. Ronnie, how's it going?
It's going great.
And we got Damon as well. Damon, how you doing?
I'm doing great. I'm doing wonderful.
Awesome. And of course, we got the man of the hour, Phil. We have so many questions about Ironwolf. The 3 of us have been playing together, and it's probably one of the coolest multiplayer games out there, just in how unique it is. And I think one of the first questions that we were talking about was, do you have like a passion for World War II or that time period? Like, how did this game come about? And I guess where was the focus, and what's the story behind it?
Yeah, so I think initially we were working through ideas that we thought would work well with current VR tech. So one of the key issues we felt with VR tech is locomotion, essentially. So the first thing that really appealed to us about submarine game was that we'd be able to do a locomotion technique that didn't require teleporting all the time, which in some quick arcade games it works really well, but for something like a submarine game you want sort of slower pace, immersive, it doesn't make you feel like a superhuman, but instead you're there experiencing it as you would as a human being, I guess. So that was kind of what appealed to us with it. Equally, we'd played World War II games in the past, and Silent Hunter and games like that. But I wouldn't say that the overriding thing was to make a submarine game. It was more that we felt, okay, this can work really, really well with the current VR tech.
Very cool. And I guess just to piggyback off of that a little bit, one of the things that works so well in the game, like you mentioned, is the fact that because you're in a closed environment within the submarine, you're able to use, each level of the submarine, including the deck, as, kind of a self-contained room scale, square experience. So the player really knows, you don't even have to think about it. You're just going from place to place, level to level. But one of the things I noticed right away was, it felt right when you were up on the deck. You could tell you were moving, but at the same time, there wasn't the kind of like one of the things I was worried about, before I tried the game was thinking, man, am I going to get sick being on a submarine? Is it going to be shaky? Is it going to be? And I noticed you guys made the decision not to have, the waves kind of rocking I was just kind of curious if you guys had ever tried implementing anything like that, and if it just was completely infeasible, or I was just curious.
Yeah, we didn't want a slow swaying motion because both myself and Aaron, the other developer on Ironwolf, we're both quite susceptible to motion sickness. So any sort of slow motion like that, we just felt would be too much on the motion sickness front. So we wanted to make it as accessible to as many people as possible. So it's a sort of a compromise there between the reality and what we thought would work well in virtual reality.
Okay, very good. No, I think you guys made the right decision because I can't imagine like going, once things get kind of frantic, you're moving around so much. I think any kind of swing would really throw people off, but I was just kind of curious. So.
Yeah, and you mentioned Aaron. We should go ahead and mention Ionized Studios is the studio, which is you guys. But I don't know if you want to talk a little bit more about yourself, introduce Aaron, and maybe what you guys contributed to the project and how Ionized Studios came about.
Okay, so Ionized Studios is myself and Aaron. So our background is we went to school together many years ago. 15 years ago now, going back. We both went off. We've had different careers in various bits of computing industry. And I think when the DK2 came out, we both picked one up and we were playing with little hobby projects and really enjoying it. Then we saw the Vive, the track controllers, and we're like, yeah, we want to make a game for this. And that was at the point we started a company and ended up making Ironwolf.
And I guess how long did it take, from initial idea to whenever you guys released on early access? I know it came out a little while ago, but what was that process like? And how? I guess okay. So I'm asking a lot of questions, but here's the main one. When did you reach a point where you realized that okay, this is ready now for early access? What had you included in the game at that point that you were like, okay, we're ready to show this to the world and start getting feedback? And how long kind of was that process, and what was it like for you?
Yes, I think from starting to releasing on early access was about 10 months of working every spare hour we had in the day. And really what we wanted to do for early access was release something that was pretty polished. So we spent about 2 months polishing the features we had, because we really just wanted to get feedback from what we had in the game and then use that to drive how we move it forward. So I wouldn't say a minimal experience, but we felt it was exactly what we needed for people to get into the game, have some fun, and also to be able to start, giving us ideas and talking about, the future of the game and which bits we should focus on for moving forward.
Just kind of curious, when you're developing a multiplayer game, how much focus do you put on just player to player interaction versus trying to find a way to make an engaging single player in case, right now a big challenge with a lot of multiplayer games on the current VR system is just there's not a ton of people out there playing each title. So I was just kind of curious, like when you guys were trying to figure out, like, is it just you're focused on making the experience the best as possible and hope that people will come to the game, or do you kind of have to balance, well, we know early on it's going to be difficult to have players find matches, and how do we provide engaging experiences if that's not going to be possible? Just kind of curious, because the appeal of Ironwolf is, to anyone I think that plays the game, it's super apparent that this is something totally unique and unlike anything you've really played before. It takes any, a submarine game that isn't in VR is not anywhere nearly as engaging as what you guys have put together. So but like I said, it's sometimes hard to find players. So what do you guys do to kind of try to get around that?
Yeah, so we've come at this from a couple of angles, because I think it's a totally fair point. In VR at this stage, there's just not that many users in comparison to flat screen games. So the first thing we did is make sure it is playable single player. So we've added a set of assists so that, for example, the torpedo room, if you're playing on your own, that'd be really difficult to do. You'd have to be running around a lot, and not every player's going to want that experience. So we've made it so you can automate those parts if you wish to. Equally, we've been trying to make the multiplayer easier for people to join. I think this was something we picked up from feedback when we first released. And so we've just recently tried to improve that so people can hot join rooms and speak to people before they start the game, and also adding a remake function. So once you've found a group of people that you're playing with, you can remake the mission and restart it. So hopefully that will help as a sort of quality of life improvement as well.
Yeah, I saw your sorry to interrupt, but your most recent update had that, right? Where people could actually jump into a game and then have others join in as the game is already in progress.
Yeah.
Was that something that you guys got from feedback? Were there a lot of people kind of giving that suggestion, or was it something you came up with on your own and figured that, I'm just curious how that's being received right now, how, if that's been exactly what people were looking for.
Yeah, no, the feedback from that's been very positive, because as I say, it's kind of a quality of life feature. I think when we were developing it, because we were just used to hopping into a game with each other, we didn't think about it at the time, because one of us would set up a game, the other one would join, and we'd do a test. But then in the real world, if you're setting up a public game, it's not that organized. So just making it a little bit easier for people to join, that quality of life hopefully will help the multiplayer community.
Yeah, I can say, just from our experience, it was surprisingly easy to get into a game together. It really didn't take any effort at all on our part.
Well, and that pre-lobby place of where you're their hands and head, and that kind of helps, because I kind of immediately can look over and I see, oh, okay, he's in. A lot of games don't have that, and that helped quite a bit.
Very cool. So one of my next questions was... I wanted to get away from Ironwolf for a second, maybe just talk VR in general. Maybe if you could give us a little bit more of like your experience with development and how that's come about. And, were you developing a lot before VR, and what was the transition like?
Okay, so my background is in academia. So I was doing my PhD in computer vision algorithms, essentially. And then the DK2 came along, and that kind of grabbed me.
I was going to say, that's kind of like that's pretty directly applicable, right?
It can be if you're working on the hardware side. So you see things like inside-out tracking. It's very much based on computer vision.
Okay.
But I think for the content generation, not so much.
Okay.
It's sort of different discipline. But I got grabbed by it when the DK2 came out. Made a few hobby projects.
Okay.
Which was fun, and then and that sort of transitioned into trying to make a full product.
What is Ironwolf developed on? I'm just curious, because I didn't know if it was
Unity.
Unity, okay. Yeah, it looks great, by the way. I was talking to Damon and Zane. Yeah, talking to Damon and Zane about it before getting on with you. One of the things that was very striking, and I know it's not super complex, but it's just you don't see it in a lot of games. I think one of the awe moments for me was when I got onto the deck for the first time, and you just see that there's just water all around you. It's very, and likewise, if your sub gets sunk, it's really kind of scary. The first time you deal with it, you really do feel like, what can I do? The water's coming in. Like, we were frantically trying to, open up everything to try to see if we could get the sub to release the water, and it just filled more and more. And it's just, it's a very great look. When you said that you guys had spent a lot of time polishing what was there, I could totally tell, because I feel like every part of the game that is there, it works exactly like you would expect it to, and looks great at the same time. So I just wanted to, it's fantastic looking.
Yeah, actually,
thank you.
About that, I think the first time I ever jumped into the game, I did like a little gameplay video for YouTube, and so once the sub was hit and it started sinking, like, I was actually really panicking and trying my best to like play it cool in the video recording, but like I was just like, I have no idea what to do, and this is really, it just, one of the things about VR, it totally messes with your brain, and I did not like the fact that like the water was rising up, and the immersive feel of it just had me kind of panicking inside, even though I knew like I could rip off the headset at any time, but it was just So whatever you guys did there, very, well done on that.
Yeah, it was amazing. An interesting part of the game to develop, because we were thinking, well, okay, so how do we let the player know that they've died, that the submarine's been destroyed? And we thought, well, we can't just fade to black, or, just have an explosion, it's all over really quickly. So we kind of came up with that mechanic, because, to represent that you've died in VR, you have to give it more consideration than just a game over screen. There's more you can do with that. So it was definitely a fun thing to develop.
Well, I don't. Oh, go ahead, David.
Sorry. No.
Go ahead.
I'm not totally versed on subs, but especially the World War II area. But was there any way that they can combat, other than pumping out water? Is there any other way to combat leaks in the hull and things like that? I'm sure there was. I don't know it historically, but do you know any knowledge of that? And if so, is that going to be possibly part of the game where you're kind of having to patch a leak?
Yes, I'll come at that from two sides. I mean, I'm not a historian, so I wouldn't want to comment in too much detail about exactly how that could have been dealt with in World War II. I mean, I think that we've all seen old Navy films where they might close off a compartment. So if that's flooding, then so I assume they might have had a similar mechanic to that, but I can commit to that. But in terms of what we're going to have in the game, we have definitely have plans to add some more damage control. So we're looking towards being able to turn valves on and off. So if something's leaking, you'll turn a valve and that'll stop it. And also having a pump to push the water out. So that's the 2 points that we're looking at to add on the damage control front.
Yeah, I was going to chime in also, and just in terms of so that sounds like that would be really, really interesting. Like, as far as gameplay is concerned, just being able to, it gives yet another task for your team to be able to kind of manage the damage in different compartments, in addition to all the stuff that's already going on. I was just going to say that it's interesting in VR how the anticipation leading up to your final moments in the sub are so effective compared. I mean, once the submarine's full of water and you're dead, kind of like you said, a fade to black isn't nearly as scary as seeing the water kind of rise. Like, once it's over with, okay, I can breathe. Like, I guess it filling up with water is okay for me. But while it's happening, there's a very visceral reaction, I think, that as it's getting a little bit higher and higher, you're feeling less and less comfortable. So it's kind of, I think once you're able to put some of those gameplay elements in there, I think it would be really cool to kind of manage, that kind of fear with the relief that you would probably get from seeing that, okay, my efforts are not in vain. I'm actually, it would probably feel pretty awesome to somehow, save your team, save the sub, and also get out of a jam. I think that sounds really cool. So,
yeah, I mean, they talk about horror in VR, and I feel like this is right up there with all those other games.
Yeah. It opens a lot of opportunities of just people just screaming at each other, we don't have that in a lot of VR. Where people are just going rampant at each other, like, you gotta do it, save us! Like, it's just fun. Have you had any of that playtesting where you've seen people working together How many's the maximum people that can be in game at a time?
Yeah, that's actually one of my questions, is because we jump in and we usually just join our own private group with the three of us, but it seems like you can have more, right, Phil?
Yes, I mean the maximum's 4 at the moment, and we're looking towards adding more stuff for people to do, because I think if there's 4 people at the moment, there might not be enough stuff to keep everyone busy all the time. So I think as time goes on and we flesh out the systems that are there'll be more content for 4 people to interact with. I think 4's a reasonably good number.
No, 4 is great, and so just to kind of talk about the teamwork aspect of it in terms of it, being multiplayer. One of the things that we had mentioned also offline before jumping on the call with you was just how like every task is rather different, and so there's really a sense of a teamwork dynamic that you don't really see. Or at least I haven't seen in a lot of the other really popular multiplayer games. I mean, there's, obviously you have your military sim shooters and other types of games out there, but usually one player can dominate if they needed to, but here there's really that sense of cooperation needed across all different abilities and all different tasks that need to be done. And then there needs to be that sense of communication as well. So I don't know, was there any thought that went into that in creating a multiplayer experience, or was that, just from the get-go what you guys had planned? And I guess that's kind of my question.
Yeah, I think when we thought of the submarine as being the sort of topic of the game, we felt that would happen naturally. In order to man a submarine, there's just lots of different roles, and they're all, as you say, very different. So if you're using the periscope, you can't be driving the submarine at the same time, or using a hydrophone. They're all very different and require someone to be doing something different at that time. So we just felt, there's a nice lot of variety there between all the roles. But the other thing we didn't say, okay, at the beginning of the game you have to choose, I'm the gunner or I'm the guy who drives the boat. We wanted to leave that really fluid so players could kind of decide between themselves. And it's interesting because in playtesting we observed you get people just kind of naturally making a role for themselves, but it might be different, between each group of players. And that fluidity was something that we were really keen on.
Phil, that's the other big thing about the game that I noticed is the barrier to entry. It's not difficult to get in, and the tutorial actually is quite good, and you can hop in and start playing relatively quickly. You still have to get used to what everything does, but it seemed like it's a game that we were able to get in pretty quickly and talk it out amongst ourselves. What does this do? What does this do? And kind of get up and running rather fast, but not so fast that the game is simple. It's not simple by any means. So that is something I think is missing from a lot of games, where they're either huge learning curves and they require lots and lots of work, like say Onward, where you really have to put a lot of time and energy in, and then games that are so simple that after 5 minutes you kind of mastered it. So I think it strikes a really good balance.
Yeah, and it's a really hard thing to get right. And I mean, we weren't sure if we got that right up until the moment it was released and the community was starting to play with it. Because when you're developing, you kind of how each system works, and you've used it thousands of times as you're developing. So you're always questioning yourself as to, is there enough detail in this, or is it way too hard and no one's going to understand what they need to do? But this was something, as I say, we had that big block of testing before we released, and we really iterated a lot with our test group, and that helped a ton. Testing it was the thing that brought it to that point where, as you say, it's what's the expression? You want it to be easy to play but hard to master, and that's what we're going for, really, with every decision we're making in the design of the game.
Yeah.
How many were in your test? Oh, I wanted to ask Phil just real quick. How many were, if you can reveal it, how many were in your testing group? Like, how many different people were your core testing?
So unbelievably, it was 3 people.
Wow.
Who are our test group. But the thing was, we were fortunate and we knew them in real life, so we could let them test and then have a Skype call with them and go through in detail their experiences. And they were great. They wrote up big reports and everything they did, recorded themselves, the audio of themselves while they played, and they were fantastic. And it took it from something that me and Aaron had been doing by ourselves for many months, and then having people go through it in that kind of detail and feeding back to it just made it a much, much better game at the end of it, because things that seemed so logical logical to me and Aaron, because when we were developing it, we just kind of got into that thought process, and the tester's like, well, why on earth does it do that? And we were able to make those adjustments before we brought it to early access, which I think really helped make it understandable when we released it.
Was there anything from that initial test group that kind of stuck out to you as like very memorable in terms of like them pointing out an improvement to the game where for you and Aaron, it was just like, oh, wow, like we did not see that, but it makes total sense now?
I'm trying to think. I mean, honestly, I think we generated probably, hundreds of changes during that process. So I'm trying to think if there was anything really specifically that we had. I think for some reason we decided that when you're reversing the submarine, the sub would turn itself around. I don't know why we did that, but we did, and the testers were like, why on earth is it doing that? And we got rid of that quite quickly.
No, it's funny to also see just like what comes out of groupthink when you have, a team of people kind of trying to tackle a problem. Because I noticed when I played myself before, just alone trying to figure out all the systems, I didn't quite it's not that I didn't understand everything. It's that, I think trying to figure out all of the different systems at once is kind of like, oh my gosh, like you can tell this is made for, obviously a single person can't really man a submarine, right? So it's just kind of fascinating. Once you're in a group of multiple people in the sub, all of a sudden things are more spread out, and Zane kind of explained to me how the mapping worked, and because I when I had played by myself, I wasn't 100% sure like how to find targets and all of that kind of thing, and it was just to me it's really cool to be able to get in with the group and see like different minds kind of approach different systems differently. So I didn't know if that was anything like when you guys had, if you guys had tapes of your testers kind of, trying things out for the first time, if you ever noticed different people kind of reacting differently to different things and those kind of
Yeah, I think the feedback we got was that people enjoyed working out the systems, that it was a part of the experience.
Yeah.
Because when we were thinking about how to tutorialize it, it's quite tricky, because if we went through everything in complete detail, it'd be a really long tutorial. And I think people would get quite bored during that. And it kind of surprised us. But if you give people enough to kind of have a reasonable idea of what they're doing, they seem to then enjoy working out the rest and sort of piecing together the puzzle of all the bits and pieces that are there. And I mean, that was the main thing, that it was kind of surprising to us, because we were thinking, okay, how do we tutorialize all this stuff? But yeah, if you give people enough of an introduction, they just seem to run with it.
Yeah, you're right, because it is, I mean, thinking back to my first experiences, especially in the game, it is rewarding to feel like, okay, like I learned from the tutorial, but I also figured out how some of this stuff works on my own. You have that sense of, okay, cool, like I'm getting this, I'm moving along, like I accomplished something. So that is
Ronnie.
Yeah. So
sorry to interrupt, but isn't it weird how like VR it lends itself very well to being able to be in an online group with people and explain things so much quicker than you could in a regular, like just a first-person shooter, where maybe you have voice, maybe you don't. You're going to have to type it out. Oh, go over there, flip this switch, do that, do this. In VR, it's so much more natural. You've got your hands. You can talk to somebody, go, here, this button here, does this. And if you move this lever, it's going to do this. And it's so much easier. Just us on the ship, it was easier to look and watch you point at stuff and go, this is what does this. And that, to me, it makes it more immersive, and it makes more like you actually were in a ship or on a submarine, and someone was explaining to you day one, a new recruit.
Yeah, I was gonna say, because I mean, when you and I were kind of going through some of this stuff, like you said, we were pointing at different gauges and different displays and explaining to each other, oh hey, look, if you look, if you look at this gauge here, it shows you how far you've submerged and this and that, and you're right, like it being in VR with someone else, being able to actually show. I don't know if you could. If you could speak to this at all, Phil, I mean, in terms of especially all of those visual cues, which as Damon was pointing out, like becomes really essential when you're in VR to kind of, the interfacing in general is quite a bit different and more natural, I'd say, in VR, to kind of just use your environment as cues for what's going on in the game. Was it difficult to program all of those different visuals to be accurate to what was going on with the sub? Like, how much air you're releasing and how it affects the submarine versus taking in water versus a working periscope, all of those kind of, because it seems like there's so many systems that are relying upon each other to adequately drive the submarine. I'm just kind of curious how hard that was to develop.
Yeah, it's certainly the most complex piece of software I've ever worked on. As you say, there's lots and lots of systems, and they're all interrelated. So if you make a change to one, it can affect another. So that was a challenge. But then doing it for VR, that was another challenge on top, because you've got all these analog controls all of a sudden. So one thing before we started the project we didn't appreciate was, say, with sound design. If you move a lever, that's the player driving the sound. You can't just play a sound effect of, a lever's changed. You have to make it related to how quickly the player's moving it, and also give them haptic feedback while they're doing that. So it was those adjustments as well that made it particularly challenging throughout the whole project, I think. Trying to give a good VR experience, but as well as coping with the complexity of a submarine as well on top of that.
Gosh, yeah. It just shows how much I'm not a developer, because it's the little things like that which really add to the game, where sound design, moving levers, how fast you do it, and what's happening in like other rooms and the sounds that come out from there. Like, I'm in it purely as a consumer and person who's enjoying the game, and it's like I said, it's the little things that make the game amazing. But obviously, it's these are probably the biggest challenges for you to really make it as realistic as possible.
Ronnie and Zane, the periscope, just the periscope alone. The periscope's amazing. Like, that's one of my most favorite parts of the whole game.
Yeah.
It's such a cool touch. The visual effect of you looking in it, it has that kind of binocular kind of sense. As you closer you get, the better you can see in it. It feels real. If just that was the game, the periscope and shooting ships, you could put that on Steam for $10 and people would be like, hey, I like it. It's good. It's fun.
No, you're right. Actually, there are games that just focus on one little thing. And it's kind of it's amazing to me, Phil, and amazing on what you and Aaron were able to accomplish. We still see, now we're starting to see some bigger titles here and there pop up on Steam for the Vive, and there are games like that on Oculus and other systems. But a lot of the gameplay mechanics underneath them are oftentimes not nearly as detailed and in depth as some of the games that we've seen a lot of independent developers kind of be able to implement in their games. And Ironwolf is one of them, where you see what's going on, and realistically, they're very complex systems, really, that are all working together in a way that is uniquely suited for VR. Like, all of the things that you mentioned are very satisfying gameplay elements for virtual reality specifically. Like, if it wasn't, if you were just playing a game with a controller or a keyboard, moving levers and walking around and kind of managing these systems might feel more cumbersome, I think. But when it's in virtual reality and you're actually, it's now you doing it, it has a much more, it just feels much more involved and interesting. And likewise, I think systems that work better in traditional games, when they're applied to virtual reality, can feel the same way. All of a sudden, do these kind of automated mechanics just feel boring and dull, and if they don't engage in your movement correctly, it's just not. So I was just going to say, your game is a great example of how I think, you guys are the ones really moving the VR platform forward, and it's going to be, it's games like Ironwolf that I think that show really what the medium's capable of.
Yeah, thanks. That's very kind of you. For us, we're mad about VR, and we went into it wanting to make a game that we wanted to play.
Yeah.
So I think that meant that we just, every single system, we wanted it to be satisfying to us. We wanted to enjoy it, and we wanted to put as much detail in as we thought was going to be fun for the game. So it was really what was driving it, is that, we just, absolutely mad about VR. And when you've got that passion for something, I think it can, really drive you to sort of try and come to the best solutions possible for all the various parts that go into the game.
No, that's absolutely for sure. Oh, let's get back to asking you a couple more questions about the game, because as you can see, Damon, Ronnie, and myself, the three of us can just really geek out about the game because of how much we're enjoying it. But but I'm sure you don't mind at the same time.
But it's got those core gameplay elements, like Ronnie was saying. It has really good core gameplay elements, and the periscope, the being above the water on the deck with shooting down planes, that in itself is a really cool gameplay element. Mm-hmm. And then actually navigating the ship, it's taken really good gameplay elements, merged them together, and added that teamwork, and it's just a really neat effect. And the VR aspect of it just enhances it 100 times over.
No, couldn't agree with you more. So just to go back to the learning curve that we were talking about a little bit earlier, Phil, is there any, what was your knowledge of submarines before this? Because I think one of the things that impressed us a lot was the fact that the game was, I don't want to say complicated. We'll just it was very involved, and you did have to learn how to use a lot of the different systems. And it seems like, I have no knowledge of submarines, so you could have made it all up, and I wouldn't have known if that was real or not. But for yourself and for Aaron, was there a natural, just interest or passion in submarine warfare,
and even just the research? I mean,
the research, things like that. Because it seemed like you were alluding to the fact that this is just something that made sense for virtual reality. But like Zane was saying, I mean, it's very apparent once you're in that everything has a purpose, that it feels like it all makes sense. And we've encountered, interviewing lots of different VR developers, some people that approach this from, I'm a super hobbyist in this niche thing, and I was able to bring that. Or sometimes it's surprisingly someone that, I don't have a background in this whatsoever, but it seemed like it would make sense in VR, and then we did the research, and this is what we. So what was the process like once you guys decided that submarines were going to be the way you guys decided to go? Going from that idea to actually implementing it in the game, what did that involve?
Yes, I think. We started off, once we decided it was going to be a submarine game. We started researching it. So, I think that involved watching every submarine film we could get our hands on, any articles, books, various mediums.
Before we got it, the reason I was laughing was because Damon, before we got on, was like, we should totally ask him what his favorite submarine movies are.
Das Boot all the way.
and your best Sean Connery impression of things don't react too well to bolts. That's as good as I can get.
But continue. So I didn't want to interrupt, but that's pretty...
No problem. So we started off with that. So we had this vision of reality, and it wasn't 100% realistic, because we're using films as well, So it's trying to find the interesting points of submarine warfare, because in reality, there's a lot of waiting. It's quite a slow process. Mm-hmm. So, we were taking in some of the reality, some of the sort of popular fiction regarding it, and then thinking, okay, so how can we take this and move it into the virtual reality sphere? So we decided we're not going to be beholden to history or reality. We're going to take something and make it work well in virtual reality. And that's really been our philosophy throughout the whole thing. Is start with the historical and then make changes until it gets to a point where we're happy with how it's working in virtual reality.
Gotcha. And just to take maybe a step earlier than that, what was it about submarines that fascinated you guys? I know you mentioned earlier in the interview about how the room scale and not the locomotion aspect, but how did your attention even focus to submarines? How did that even get on your radar? No pun intended.
It's very hard not to make puns when talking about submarines. You just keep on. But no, I mean, for me, I think we felt it had lots of phases to the gameplay. So, first of all, you're trying to find your prey, as it were, something to shoot. So that's one phase, that's one set of systems to use. And then you're going to go and try and sink that, or you might be attacked by a plane. So there's lots of different phases. And then my particular thing I was particularly passionate about was then you almost have like a horror game unfold if a destroyer comes along and starts depth charging you. So I think it was all these kind of phases. The fact it would work well as a multiplayer, giving that teamwork aspect, just all those ingredients combined is what we felt would make a really compelling experience.
No, I mean, and they do blend together very well. So like Damon and Ronnie were saying earlier, kudos to you for putting something together like this, which has been such a unique experience, and it's grabbed all of our attention. that's for sure. And so, especially for people listening, like if you guys haven't had a chance to check this game out, this is something you should be looking into right away. And I know we had mentioned it on a Game Talk previously, but since that time, I think what we've been able to do is really pick apart the multiplayer and get the best, get really some of the best elements of what the game has to offer, which we've been talking about in this. But Phil, I wanted to ask, I know you kind of alluded to some things earlier in the interview, but just moving forward, maybe if you can give us an idea, we can do short-term and also long-term vision for Iron Wolf and where you'd like this game to go, and what people can expect, at least what you're able to share. I don't know how much of it is under wraps that you keep close to the chest, but whatever you can share with us, I would love to hear it.
Okay, so I mean, we've tried to be as open as possible with the community. So we've got a Trello board with a whole roadmap that people can vote on things that they're most interested in seeing developed. Because we really genuinely want to interact with the community, and it's also really helpful for us to have feedback as to, okay, this is the things we'd like. We really like to see. It really helps us inform our next steps with the game. So in the short term, for us, we're looking at adding more content. So different types of enemies, for example, so battleships, aircraft carriers. On the other side of things, adding new bits to the submarine, so things like the damage control are things we're looking to add. That will lead to more missions and more content. A long-term vision is you have an open world where you sail off, you get given orders, there might be a big naval battle breaking out, and you go and try and turn the tide of it. That's the long-term vision, but we're trying to build up the smaller blocks first, get them to be really robust and really fun, and then we can build that into a larger open world towards the end of the development cycle.
Just curious, did you guys ever think about having submarines versus other submarines, like all player controlled?
Yeah, this is something that we get asked a lot, and it is something we started thinking about more, I think, since so many people in the community have asked about it. But I couldn't give a definitive answer on that at this point, because I mean we've got a very large roadmap that we want to go through, and if you keep on adding stuff, you'll never finish, as it were.
Of course.
It's hard. I would think it's very difficult. I mean, that's the aspect of it that's like, how do you work that? Because in a sub, that's actually quite difficult to do, right?
Yeah, and I think we'd have to make it somewhat more arcadey than the current game. You'd have to make more compromises in terms of that. But the other concern would be if it's PvP, then you have to have the player base to support that, right? So you have to have enough people that can come in and man the subs to fight against each other. So there's a few obstacles to being able to do that, but it's not to say we've completely dismissed it. But it's something we're thinking about, but not at a point where we could say, yeah, we're definitely going to do that.
Early on, you mentioned, I mean, obviously the Vive was the first VR headset to come with motion controls, and Steam is a very open platform, and etc. Do you guys have any plans to ever bring the title to other platforms, or is it really just all Vive focused at this point?
Yeah, so I think in the long term, it's something we'd like to do. I mean, the VR community, I mean, it's such a small community, so we really want, for as many people who are interested in the medium as possible to be able to try our game. So that's what we'd like to do. But obviously, we're balancing that out. We're two people, and we've got to make sure that what we do is of a high quality. So
Sure.
yeah, that's the balance. But.
Speaking to that, if you go on Steam right now, this is ranked 26 out of all the VR games and user reviews out of almost 1,400. So anybody listening at home and you're wondering, about this game, ranked 26 out of 1,400. It's usually always on the first page or at the very top of the second page for VR games. So I mean that, like, you can't fake that. That's you know what I mean. That's 100%.
It's well deserved. It is well deserved.
100%. Yeah. So that's a big telltale sign. And then just the whole aspect of the core gameplay of it is so good. So it's a big testament, and to have such a small group of testers and then yourself, it's just amazing.
And I don't know, I might get in trouble from Zane for asking this question. I'm not sure because it might be a little off topic. But I was gonna ask you more personally. I mean, in terms of your own research, because it sounded like, I mean, you said eye tracking and that kind of thing might be. Explain a little bit more about what you do.
Sorry, I'm a bit lost. My research.
Yeah, you're because I just remember it's somewhat sounding. I mean, you said that VR can tie in a little bit to what you do on your day job. I was just kind of curious.
So apologies. Maybe I wasn't clear. So when we started Ironwolf, I was finishing my PhD with computer vision at that point. But
Okay.
I do some different work now. That's sort of just general tech stuff.
Okay. Okay, very interesting. No, it was
all about the games.
It was intriguing to me, so that's why I just
24/7.
just in general computer vision, and it just sounded I didn't know much about it, so I was just kind of curious. We can cut that section out of the interview.
Cut that part. That part was great.
All right. Well, let's get back to it then. Phil, we want to be respectful of your time. Is there first, before we go on to a couple more questions, but before we go on to, I guess, the shameless plug, and where we'll talk even more about how much we love the game and try to get our listeners on board, was there anything else that you wanted to touch upon or cover, or just speak to the game, things coming out, or stuff in the game that we haven't necessarily highlighted that you think is something worth mentioning?
No, I don't think so. No, just to say, thanks for having me on. It's been really fun. So thanks for that. And I'm glad you guys enjoyed playing the game, and we're going to keep on working at it and improving it as time goes on during early access.
Very cool. And is there? Well, I don't know if it's.
Is there a schedule? Is that what we're thinking? Like, what is there?
Yeah, that's what I was
Is there an idea
ask.
for how long to be in early access? Give or take.
We don't have a hard limit on that. I mean, I think we're looking at about 6 months, but we'd want to have got through everything on our roadmap to call it the end of early access. So yeah, we'll see how long that takes. As I said, we'll see high.
I had one other question too, Phil. The gamers that are out there now, how have they been communicating to you their experiences, glitches, what they're finding? How are you communicating directly with the players?
So two forms. So we've got the Steam forums, and we've also got I did the Discord server for the game. So that's a bit more real time. Myself and Aaron are often on there, and we can talk to people as they're playing, which is awesome. Because if we release a new patch and there's a bug, we can get really quick feedback and ask questions about what's happening, so we can fix it really quickly. So that's the two main ways.
Okay,
Gotcha.
cool. Yeah, that seems to be very popular. Discord, Dante from Onward, he uses it. He's on it 24/7. So yeah, it seems to be quite popular with developers
there's
now.
several games that have been using that. So, and it seems like a lot of the people in VR who are active and trying to give that feedback and be people who are testing out in the early access phase are using it as well. So, for anybody who's listening that wants to be more involved in the game, now you have, or the game development side, now you have a way to do that both on the Steam forums and through Discord. And this leads to, I guess, the last question, which is just a shameless plug opportunity for you. I mean, obviously we are going to put a link to the game in the show notes. So guys, make sure you check that out. Again, I mean, this comes highly recommended by myself, Ronnie, and Damon. And obviously you can see through the reviews and such, but Phil, was there anything else that you wanted to mention? I also ask usually now where people can get in touch with you, but I guess this is a place for you to plug any links or social media or stuff like that if you want.
Yeah, so we have our Twitter accounts. So let me look up the handle for that. So you caught me a bit off guard. So it's Ionized Studios is our Twitter. You can also follow us on YouTube, which is, I believe, the same. That's where most of our media comes out. But whenever we do a big patch, we tend to put a Reddit post up, and that's usually where the most active discussion about anything new that's coming out will happen.
Have you been approached as far as competitive gaming by anybody, or is that on the landscape? Like, because this is definitely something that you could get a competitive feel for it, or a not a professional gamer, but a competitive feel, or involve more vendors in it, things like that. Has anyone came to you and approached you with that kind of idea?
No, they haven't.
Just as far as esport games go, like it's kind of its own thing. It's definitely something new. It's definitely outside the norm, breaks the mold.
Yes, yeah, and although competitive games, again, I think you come back to this player base. When you see the really large competitive games, they have huge player bases that are able to drive that scene. But I hope it does happen in VR because I love esports. Really big fan. But I think it'll take a little while to have that kind of player base behind it to be able to drive an esports scene.
Very cool. So, we have your Twitter now. We have the Discord, Reddit, Steam. So any place that you guys want to get in touch with Phil, you guys know how to do it. Phil and the team, Phil and Aaron. But Phil, thank you so much for the time. We really appreciate it, and we will not stop helping you promote the game because we love it a lot, and we want more people in there to play with. To be honest with you.
Thank you so much.
So awesome. Well, definitely keep in touch, and we hope to catch you again very, very soon.
All right then. Bye.